Going on, everybody? This video you're watching is the Year in Wrestling Part 1 2002. So I'll be talking about Royal Rumble up to the end of WrestleMania 18. And then I'll be done with Part 1. So I'm going to start talking about, I believe it was before the Royal Rumble, or maybe it was after the Royal Rumble, after Vince got his ass kicked and got busted open by Ric Flair at the Royal Rumble. So maybe it was after the Royal Rumble. I'm not really sure. I forget, it was either January or February 2002. Vince on SmackDown, sitting in a chair, backstage segments, was cutting these really odd, weird, crazy promos. He kept talking about how he's going to have to kill what he created, the WWF, and he's going to have to kill it and inject poison into it. And then at the end of SmackDown, he goes, the poison I'm going to inject is from me. And then he turned around in his chair, and his chair said the letters NWO on him. Had the NWO logo on the back of his chair. So he said he's going to inject a dose of poison into the WWF with himself and with the help of the NWO. So then he turned around and revealed the NWO logo on his chair. So then all the fans knew right there the NWO was coming into the WWF. Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Hulk Hogan. But I'm sure before Vince's promo, it was reported all over wrestling websites and dirt sheets that the NWO, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and Hulk Hogan were signed already by the WWF. So the NWO was coming to the WWF after the Royal Rumble at No Way Out. What is No Way Out? The letters stand for? Well, No Way Out, NWO. It spells out NWO. So great idea to bring in the NWO at the No Way Out pay-per-view in 2002 in February. So Vince cuts that crazy odd promo on SmackDown. They showed a number of backstage segments where Vince was talking about that he was unhappy, and he basically snapped, and he was unhappy because Ric Flair was partial 50% owner of the WWF. So that was really odd, but it was also pretty funny watching Vince cut those promos in segments and sitting in a chair. So I think that was either January or February he did that. Royal Rumble took place in January. The winner of the Royal Rumble was Triple H, the Game. He returned in January on a Raw from Madison Square Garden. He returned, got a huge ovation, huge pop, and then he returned in the Royal Rumble. Match was his first match back, and Triple H wins the 2002 Royal Rumble. You had the Godfather return in the Royal Rumble. Kurt Hennig, Mr. Perfect returned, and Goldust also returned. So three old names. The Godfather was formerly Papa Shango, and then Kama before that, or after Papa Shango, he became Kama, the Supreme Fighting Machine, and then he became the Godfather in the Nation of Domination. So then he returned in 2002. Kurt Hennig returned also as Mr. Perfect in 2002. And who was the third guy? Goldust. Goldust also returned in 2002 in the Rumble. And all three of those guys, except for the Godfather, I think he got eliminated really quick. Mr. Perfect and Goldust, they had a pretty good showing in the Rumble match for themselves. So as I said, Triple H wins the Royal Rumble last, eliminating Kurt Angle. Other matches that were good that I'll talk about at the Royal Rumble 2002 were The Rock against Chris Jericho for the WWF Undisputed Championship. Jericho was the champion. He was defending, and The Rock was the challenger. They had a good match. They usually always had good matches against each other, and it was entertaining. Jericho retains. I think maybe by disqualification. I don't remember the finish. Or maybe won by pinfall. I don't know. Anyways, we all know Jericho retained because he defended the title at WrestleMania 18. So, up next, that was good, was Trish against Jazz for the Women's Championship. I believe Trish was the champion, defending against Jazz. Jazz just came into the WWF and debuted, I believe, at Survivor Series 2001. So Jazz was now in the Divas division. And she would help it because she was a pretty damn good worker. So she would have good matches with Trish and Lita and other people. Her time in the WWF, Jazz was pretty good for the Divas division. Trish defends the title. I believe she had a broken hand or broken fingers. Maybe it was just a angle and she didn't have a broken hand or fingers. Maybe it was just an angle. I don't know. But they did an angle on SmackDown where Jazz put Trish's hand like this, put it in a case and slammed the door on her hand. So basically her fingers were broken, or her hand was broken because she had it all taped up. So Trish was going into the match already injured with a taped up hand or broken fingers, whatever. Storyline wise, I don't know if her fingers or hand were really broken. I'm just saying storyline wise they were. Trish wins. It might have been by DQ, I don't remember. But Trish wins and retains the Women's Championship. And Jazz and Trish always had good matches with each other. They were entertaining. And I enjoyed a lot of Trish Stratus's matches because most of them were pretty damn good. And Trish was a great worker. She became a great wrestler. She put in her time. She trained her ass off and became way, way better in late 2001. And she was better in 2002 and 2003. She became really good. Up next, what I'm going to talk about is Ric Flair against Mr. McMahon. 50% owner against 50% owner of the WWF. Obviously, we all know Ric Flair wasn't the real owner of the company at any time. It was just a storyline. Ric Flair and Vince, for what they did, they had a pretty entertaining match. I believe it was no holds barred, I think. They had a pretty good match. Both guys bled. I believe Ric Flair bled. He bled a lot in his matches. Anyways, I know Vince bled a lot. So both guys were bleeding, and it was basically a street fight. It wasn't a wrestling match, but it was still entertaining. Vince got busted open really bad, was bleeding a lot. And then Ric Flair knocked him out with a pipe to the head, pipe to the skull. Vince is knocked out cold. And then Vince wakes up, Ric Flair puts on the figure four, Vince taps out to the figure four leg lock. It was great to see Ric Flair back in the ring in the WWF. He was in pretty good shape in 2002 for being like 53 years old, I think. So he's in pretty damn good shape, and he could still put on a good match with just about any wrestler on the roster. So, and him and Vince was entertaining because people wanted to see Ric Flair kick Mr. McMahon's ass. That's the bottom line. Vince was not a wrestler. He was not a good wrestler at all. He wasn't even really a wrestler. He was just booked himself in matches to get his ass kicked because that got people to basically come to the shows and pay their money to see Mr. McMahon get his ass kicked whenever Mr. McMahon was in a match. They wanted to see him get his ass kicked. And Vince usually delivered and got his ass kicked by a lot of guys. Ric Flair, Undertaker, Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold. He got his ass kicked by a lot of guys. So the Royal Rumble 2002, if I would grade it or rate it 1 to 10, I'd say it was a 8. Pretty damn good pay-per-view. I enjoyed it. And you had during the Rumble match, you had The Undertaker come out, and Maven was in the ring, I believe, alone, waiting for someone else to enter the Rumble. Undertaker's music hits. Undertaker's going to get in the ring and basically destroy Maven. At least everybody thought so. And Maven, if you don't know who he was the first ever Tough Enough winner from 2001 Tough Enough. He won it. And now he's out of the WWE, and I don't even know if he does indie shows. And I don't really care if Maven does indie shows. I was never a fan of his. I mean, I didn't hate the guy, but he just never made me a fan of his. So Undertaker gets drop kicked from behind by Maven and goes over the top rope and gets eliminated by the rookie Maven. That was pretty shocking, and the crowd did pop and they were excited, so I guess it worked. Maven eliminating the Undertaker worked, but then a couple weeks later on SmackDown, the Undertaker absolutely destroyed Maven and Al Snow in like a hardcore match. So that was the Royal Rumble. I'd give it an 8 from 2002. It was a good Rumble. Now I'm going to talk about No Way Out 2002. Took place on February 17th, 2002 from my hometown, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I went to the show. I was there. And here's the proof I was there. There's the ticket. I don't know if you can see the date, but there it is. And I wrote in pen over No Way Out. I wrote over it because it was faded. So I just wrote over it. I don't know if you could see the date on there, but there's the proof. I was at No Way Out. This is the ticket right here. I was there. And I really wanted to go because the NWO was coming back, and they were promoted to be on the show. On the No Way Out pay-per-view, they were promoted to be there. The return of the NWO. Most importantly, what I really wanted to see was the return of Hulk Hogan to the WWF. And I got my wish. He came out with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. And that was one of the loudest pops I've ever heard. I've been at over 28 live events for the WWE and pro wrestling events. I've been to over 28 of them. And that was absolutely the loudest reaction I've ever heard in an arena. The arena exploded, and the roof was going to basically, the roof got blown off the arena. When the NWO came out and their music hit, the crowd went crazy. And that is, as I said, that is one of the loudest reactions I've ever heard at a live wrestling event for any wrestlers ever. So the crowd, then when the NWO got in the ring, I don't know if you could hear it by watching it on the pay-per-view, by watching it over, but the crowd reaction was way louder than it was on TV. When they got in the ring, immediately the fans started chanting NWO, NWO. Fans were chanting Hogan, Hogan. I was one of them. I was a NWO mark. I was a Hulk Hogan mark for basically the entire time the NWO was around, and the entire time Hogan has been around in wrestling, I've been a mark of them. So that was just really awesome to see the NWO come back. And No Way Out 2002, I was really happy to be there. Now the matches I'll talk about. Goldust returned, had his first singles match on a pay-per-view against Rob Van Dam. I believe Goldust won. If I'm wrong, I apologize. A WWF Championship, or this was billed as, I believe, a triple main event, or double main event, maybe. Undertaker took on The Rock. I don't remember who won. I think it might have been a DQ. I don't remember. Undertaker took on The Rock. That was a decent match. WWF Championship match. Chris Jericho defended against Stone Cold Steve Austin. That was a pretty decent match. It wasn't that great, but it was decent. Then you had the NWO interfere Oh yeah, and you had Kurt Angle. I think the third match of the triple main event was Kurt Angle against Triple H. Stephanie McMahon was the guest referee. So the main event, as I said, it was a decent match between Jericho and Stone Cold. NWO runs out, interferes, takes out Stone Cold, and then spray paints the NWO letters on his back in black spray paint. So that was the end of No Way Out. If I'd grade it, because I was there, and because the return of the NWO, and because of the return of Hall, Nash, and Hogan to the WWF, I would rate it a 9. Probably because I was there live. So that's why I'm giving it a 9. So that was No Way Out. Now I'm going to talk about some stuff that happened on Raw before WrestleMania 18. You had a I think this was a week before WrestleMania. I am not really sure. Anyways, Stone Cold came in the ring. This was a Raw from Chicago, I believe in March 2002, before WrestleMania 18. You had Stone Cold in the ring protesting, sitting in his chair, not leaving the ring, protesting that, I guess, the NWO come out, or Jericho comes out and gives him his title shot, or that he wanted the NWO, or he wanted somebody. Kurt Angle ended up coming out, and he tried to cut a promo and talk and tell Stone Cold to get out of the ring, that he was boring and taking up the entire show, the time of Raw. Stone Cold started throwing beers at Kurt Angle, and then Kurt Angle eventually left. And then, I don't know what happened after that. Stone Cold just disappeared and left the ring, I guess. And then you had, The Rock came out for some reason. Or The Rock went face to face with Hollywood Hogan on Raw. They were face to face cutting a promo on each other. And then The Rock got up in his face and said to Hollywood Hogan, "How would you like to go one-on-one with the Great One at WrestleMania?" The crowd popped. They loved it. And then Hogan basically ripped the crowd. Hogan, I believe, came out first. Got a huge reaction in Chicago. Fans love him in Chicago. He got a huge reaction. And then Hogan said on the mic, "You fans turned on me." And then he brought up how he built the WWF and that the fans turned on Hogan, or something like that. And then he got heat, and he actually got booed. But some fans are still cheering Hogan. And then The Rock came out. He got a huge reaction because he was super over. So then, as I said, The Rock challenged Hollywood Hogan for WrestleMania 18. And the challenge was accepted. And then The Rock walked to the back, was about to go to the back. And then Scott Hall and Kevin Nash come out. Scott Hall drills him with a right hand. Rock falls down the ramp, starts rolling down the ramp. And then Kevin Nash and Scott Hall kick him, punch him a few more times, throw him in the ring. And then Hollywood Hogan gets out a box of tools from under the ring, dumps it out, picks up a hammer, goes in the ring, hits The Rock in the back of the head, or the back of the neck with a hammer. Rock is knocked out cold. Scott Hall picks him up, does the Razor's Edge on him, or Outsider's Edge. Kevin Nash picks up The Rock, does a jackknife powerbomb on him. Then I believe Hollywood Hogan then dropped a leg on The Rock. And then the NWO, they leave. The Rock gets carried out on a stretcher. This was a very memorable Raw and a great Raw. Gets carried out on a stretcher, put in an ambulance. The ambulance is ready to leave backstage in the parking lot. And then a giant semi-truck comes up, beeping their horn, blocks the ambulance. And then the NWO, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Hollywood Hogan is driving the semi-truck. And then Scott Hall and Kevin Nash get out, scare the paramedics off. The paramedics run out of their ambulance. They run away. So The Rock is in the back, basically knocked out. Then the NWO starts smashing the windshield with chains and crowbars. And then they have a chain and they lock Scott Hall and Kevin Nash lock the back door of the ambulance. They lock it so The Rock can't get out with a steel chain. And then Hollywood Hogan backs up the semi. And then he yells out his window, he's going to cripple The Rock's candy ass. And then he goes with the semi, goes about probably 25, 30 miles an hour, slams into the ambulance, crushes it. And then he goes back, reverse, goes forward, smashes into the ambulance like 2 more times and absolutely destroys it. It looks bent in half. Supposedly The Rock was in there, but we all know he wasn't. Anyways, it was still a cool angle to do. Have the NWO attack The Rock in the ring, then they attack him in the parking lot and slam the semi-truck into the ambulance that The Rock was supposed to be in. So basically they take The Rock out, and I thought he's dead. I was like, I knew he wasn't dead, but I was like, how the hell's The Rock going to come back? How's he going to come back from that in 3 weeks or 2 weeks on TV and wrestle at WrestleMania? How in the hell do you come back from that? I didn't understand how he came back in like 2 weeks later. I think he's off TV only a full week. And then 2 weeks later, The Rock shows up on Raw and SmackDown. And he showed up and he just had some tape on his ribs. So that was the only marks he had on his entire body from getting smashed in an ambulance. And then he returned, I believe, on SmackDown and wrestled, I think, Scott Hall. The Rock returned on a SmackDown before WrestleMania and wrestled Scott Hall. They had a pretty good match. I remember it. And then on a Raw a week before, I think a week before WrestleMania 18, you had Stone Cold and The Rock team up to take on Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and Hulk Hogan on Raw in the main event. First time in, I think, 9 years, 8 or 9 years. This was Hulk Hogan's first match back in the WWF in 8 or 9 years. In his first ever singles match on Monday Night Raw, because when he was around in 93, he never wrestled on Raw until 2002. So this was the NWO's wrestling debut on Raw. It was the main event, I believe, of Raw. The week before WrestleMania 18 is Stone Cold The Rock against the NWO, Hogan, Hall, and Nash. I believe Hogan, Hall, and Nash won because I remember them getting their hands raised. So I think they won. So that was the build-up to WrestleMania 18. You also had a great build-up between The Undertaker and challenging Ric Flair. Ric Flair would not accept The Undertaker's challenges. Over and over he kept saying, no, I'm not going to wrestle or fight you. And then The Undertaker, I think on a Raw or SmackDown, attacked David Flair and took him hostage, had him backstage in like a bathroom, and David Flair was all bloodied or bleeding a little bit. And Ric Flair, or Undertaker, was holding David Flair and not letting him go, and basically upset Ric Flair so much that Ric Flair accepted The Undertaker's challenge for WrestleMania 18, so they had a match at WrestleMania, and it was a good build-up. Arn Anderson even got involved in the match a little bit. And I believe on a Raw before WrestleMania 18, you had The Undertaker even attack Arn Anderson, one of the best friends of Ric Flair. He attacked him and I believe busted him open a little. So that was a good build-up. Now I'm going to talk about WrestleMania 18. The Divas, or the first match on the show, was Rob Van Dam challenging William Regal for the Intercontinental Championship. Rob Van Dam wins, becomes the new Intercontinental Champion. I was happy because I was an RVD mark. I loved the guy in 2002. He was awesome. And a lot of people loved him. He won the title and went Rob Van Dam. Did his gimmick of pointing to himself. Which, that gimmick, that RVD gimmick, that was over too. The entire crowd would do that. when RVD would do it. So RVD's a new Intercontinental Champion. I was happy for him to get the IC title. I don't know what the second match was. It might have been for the European Championship. Anyways, Christian was a European champion, defended against DDP, Diamond Dallas Page. DDP wins with the Diamond Cutter, I believe, and DDP becomes a new European champion and goes out through the massive crowd at the Toronto Sky Dome. He goes out through the crowd and celebrates with the crowd. Celebrates his win with the crowd and does this. And the crowd, when he has his belt on his shoulder, does the DDP symbol. Or the Diamond Cutter symbol. Anyways, DDP becomes a European champion. RVD, new Intercontinental champion. Then we had a Hardcore Championship, which changed hands probably 3 or 4 or 5 times at WrestleMania 18. I believe Crash Holly won it, or had it, once. And then Molly Holly won it. I think Molly Holly actually won it. She was running down a hallway with the championship, and then she had a door slammed in her face, and she got knocked out and pinned, and then lost the Hardcore Championship to somebody, I don't know who. Might have been Goldust. Goldust became a Hardcore Champion, and then Maven, eventually Maven defeated Goldust and won the Hardcore title, and then took off in a car. So you had to have at least probably 3 or 4 Hardcore Championship changes. The Hardcore Championship changed hands at least 3 or 4 times, I think, at WrestleMania 18. Is pretty nuts. It's pretty insane. Other matches, you had the Divas, or Women's Championship. Trish, I believe, was champion. Trish Stratus defending against Jazz and Lita in a triple threat. That was a pretty good triple threat. It was enjoyable, and all 3 women could work. That's the most important thing, that all 3 women could work, and they were good wrestlers and good workers. So that was a good 3-way triple threat Divas title match, women's title match. But I'm saying Divas because they called them Divas. So that was good. I think I'm pretty sure Trish won. If I'm wrong, I apologize. I'm just going off what I remember. And I haven't watched WrestleMania 18 in a couple years, so I don't remember every match and who won. Undertaker against Ric Flair, that was pretty damn good. Good match, entertaining, I enjoyed it. I was always a fan of The Undertaker. I respect the hell out of him. I'm not freaking obsessed with The Undertaker like some people are that I know. But I'm a fan of his, and I respect the hell out of him for what he's done for the WWE and how loyal he's been. And I mean, his body's really beaten down, and The Undertaker continues to work for Vince and wrestle. He's wrestling at Hell in a Cell. So, and he wrestled at SummerSlam and WrestleMania. So I respect the hell out of The Undertaker. I just want to say that. And I respect the hell out of Ric Flair. He's one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, one of the greatest world champions of all time, and Ric Flair is definitely in my top 5. He's either number 1 or 2. Is one of my favorite wrestlers of all time is Ric Flair. So Ric Flair and Taker put on a great match, especially considering Ric Flair's age at the time. Arn Anderson gets involved, hits a spine buster on The Undertaker. That was cool to see Arn Anderson get involved and do a couple moves at WrestleMania 18. Ric Flair loses. As we all know, he lost because the streak continued. I think Undertaker was 9-0 or 10-0 after defeating Ric Flair at WrestleMania 18. He was, he won at 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 17. So Taker was 9-0. I believe he was 9-0 going into WrestleMania 18. So after the match with Ric Flair, he was 10-0. I believe he became 10-0 because he didn't work. He would have been 11-0, but or 12-0, but Undertaker did not work WrestleMania 10 or WrestleMania 16. He didn't work because he was injured, and WrestleMania 10 he was just off TV because he was disappeared and Undertaker was missing. So Taker becomes 10-0, defeating Ric Flair. Other matches, you had Booker T against Edge, and this was just a really stupid build-up and storyline. Edge and Booker T were fighting over a shampoo contract or some crap like that. I don't really remember the storyline, but they were fighting over a shampoo deal or some crap like that to get a shampoo commercial. It was a decent match, but it wasn't long enough, and Booker T and Edge are both great workers, but they didn't give them enough time, and the match just wasn't really good. I think Edge won. Kane versus Kurt Angle was decent. It was good. Kane actually had a good match with Kurt Angle. Kane could work. He was a great worker in his younger days. I don't know how good he is now and how good he's going to look against Seth Rollins, but who really cares how good he looks? He's probably going to retire in 2016. So Kane and Kurt Angle, I thought, put on a pretty good match. I believe Kurt Angle won with the ankle lock. And then now I'm going to talk about Stone Cold against Scott Hall. I almost was going to go on to the main event, but I have to talk about Scott Hall and Stone Cold. It was okay. It wasn't that good. Both guys didn't really click in the ring together, and they didn't really work that well together. Scott Hall gets, I believe, 3 stunners, 3 Stone Cold stunners, and Stone Cold wins. Kevin Nash was at ringside with Scott Hall and interfered a little bit, but Stone Cold still wins. What the hell is next? Hollywood Hogan versus The Rock is next, or it was towards the end of the show, I believe. And I believe WrestleMania 18 was also a 4-hour show. Like 17, I think, was 3 hours. 16, I think, was three or four hours. I don't remember. But WrestleMania 18, I'm pretty sure, was 4 hours long. At least I think it was. Maybe I'm dead wrong. I know 19 was 3 hours. 20, of course, was 4 hours. Whatever. But we know now that every single year WrestleMania is going to be a 4-hour show and a 2-hour kickoff. So The Rock and Hollywood Hogan have a great legendary WrestleMania moment. They have a WrestleMania type moment that they put on a good match. They didn't do much, but it was pretty good for what they did. The crowd loved it and was really into the match, and that helped the match. Rock hit, I believe, a rock bottom at the end, or people's elbow, and Hogan, I think, kicked out of one of them. Hogan injured his ribs, or he had injured ribs, I believe, going into the match because on a house show he tried to body slam Rikishi, and I believe Hogan broke some ribs, or injured them, by trying to slam Rikishi. Or he did slam him at a house show, so he had injured ribs. When The Rock hit that rock bottom on Hollywood Hogan, you could tell it injured his ribs even more because at the end of the match, Hogan was having trouble breathing and he was holding his side like he's injured, and it's because he had broken ribs. But obviously they healed because the next month at Backlash he won the world title from the Undisputed Championship from Triple H. Anyways, Hollywood Hogan and The Rock have a great match. In the beginning, they're just facing off, staring at each other, not doing anything, and the crowd is going wild. They're chanting, Hogan, Hogan, Rocky, Rocky. Fans are really into this match. Toronto, Canada, where they loved Hogan. They always loved him for some reason. I'm not saying they have a reason that they had a reason to dislike Hogan. They didn't, but Toronto, Canada was really big time Hogan marks. So they were basically, they booed The Rock out of the building some fans were chanting for The Rock and some fans were with The Rock, but a lot of them were basically cheering for Hogan exclusively. And they were just really into the match. It was great to hear and great to watch. And Hogan, they locked up Hogan, threw The Rock back. That got a huge pop. And then Hogan did his flexing and posing, and that got a huge pop. And Hogan did the ear thing, did this. That got a huge pop from the crowd. And just, Hogan was supposed to be the nasty, dirty, disgusting heel in it because he took The Rock out with the semi-truck. So I'm sure WWF wanted and thought that Hollywood Hogan would get booed. Obviously, he did not. The fans have a mind of their own, and I'm glad they cheered Hogan because it made the match great, and it was something different. So they basically they cheered Hogan so much that, like the next night on Raw, Hollywood Hogan had to turn babyface and go back to the red and yellow, and The Rock cut a promo with him, and Hollywood Hogan ripped off the NWO shirt. So the Toronto, Canada crowd at WrestleMania 18 basically turned Hollywood Hogan babyface back to the immortal Hulk Hogan. So as I said, The Rock won. It was a good match for what they did. It was good and it worked. I really enjoyed it. I was really happy to see Hogan back at a WrestleMania getting another run. I knew The Rock would probably win, but I didn't really care. I was still a fan of Hogan's. So now up next was the main event. I think I talked about every match. If I missed, the tag team titles were on the line. I believe it was a fatal four-way. The Dudleys versus the Hardys versus Billy and Chuck versus, I think, the APA. If I'm wrong about the 4 teams in it, then I'm wrong. Anyways, I don't even remember who won the tag titles. I think Billy and Chuck were the tag champs, and I think they walked out and retained the tag titles. I don't really remember. I apologize. Now on to the main event. And also at WrestleMania 18, they had 2 music groups perform. Saliva performed, and Drowning Pool performed. So then now the main event, or Drowning Pool performed, I believe when Triple H came out, they were singing his theme they wrote is a rock theme. They were singing the game song, or Time to Play the Game song. They sung it, Triple H to the ring. Triple H challenging Chris Jericho for the Undisputed Championship, and Stephanie McMahon would be with Chris Jericho like as his manager, because she lied to I think it was February Raw. Stephanie lied to Triple H and hired a fake doctor on SmackDown and lied to him that she was pregnant in the storyline, in the angle that she's pregnant. And then Linda McMahon called Triple H on a Raw and said to Triple H, "I'm sorry, Stephanie lied to you, she's not pregnant. And she lied to you about the doctor, he was a fake doctor." So Triple H found that out on the phone from Linda McMahon on Raw, and he was pissed. He looked really pissed, and he's about to go off and probably beat the crap out of Mr. McMahon, or just go off on Stephanie and break up with her. So they had a wedding where they renewed their vows, and they had a wedding that ended Raw. Stephanie came out, and she had her giant fake breasts already. She got them in like the summer of 2001. So her breasts were absolutely humongous, just popping out of her wedding gown. And Vince brought her down to ringside. She was with Vince, her father, walking to the ring to renew her vows. Vince was there standing in the ring during the wedding. Triple H came out, and a lot of fans were cheering, and a lot of fans probably knew that Triple H was going to go off on Stephanie and leave her and tell her off in the middle of the ring renewing their vows. It was going to be great television. It was great television. Anyways, Triple H gets on the mic. I thought it was great television, at least. I thought it was great. Great build-up, great angle. It was pretty damn good. Good angle for building to WrestleMania. Anyways, you had Triple H get on the mic, and I think he said, you're the biggest bitch I've ever known or met. And then I think he took his ring off and threw it in the crowd or something. Took the fake ring off, threw it in the crowd because it wasn't a real ring, because Triple H and Stephanie were not married in real life yet, so obviously it was a fake ring. I'm sure it still costed money and somebody got a free ring. Anyways, and then Vince was pissed and he pushed Triple H by the shoulder, like, what the hell are you doing? You're trying to humiliate my daughter. And Triple H kicked Vince, put him in the pedigree. Vince botched it, messed it up, tried to jump down, get off his feet too soon before Triple H jumped in the air and did the pedigree. Or got off his feet to do the move. Vince fucked up the pedigree the first time. The second time he did it and took it. And that was a hell of a Raw. Triple H leaves the ring, destroys the wedding setup in the ring. The crowd popped. The crowd loved it. It was great storytelling, great emotion. That's what you want in a storyline. You want the crowd to react that way, like they're really into it, and the crowd did. And then, what the hell is I going to talk about next? So that was a great Raw, and it was February 2002, I believe. Then on SmackDown, you had Jericho attack. Jericho with Stephanie came out with Jericho, Triple H's opponent at WrestleMania, and Triple H did not like that. Jericho attacked Triple H on SmackDown, I believe, 3 days before WrestleMania. He attacked, 3 days before WrestleMania, because SmackDown was on Thursday then. So he attacked Triple H with a sledgehammer, hit it on his leg where he tore his quad, and then he put him in the walls of Jericho on the announce table, and Stephanie was in Triple H's face yelling at him. And then on Raw, I believe in March, before WrestleMania 18, you had Stephanie versus Jericho versus Triple H in a triple threat match with the title on the line. That is pretty ridiculous, putting the championship on the line with Stephanie in the match. That was just ridiculous. And thank God they didn't have Stephanie win the WWF championship, because that would have been an absolute disgrace and just really stupid to give Stephanie the WWF Undisputed Championship. That would have been pointless and the wrong decision to make. Good they didn't make it. Jericho retained somehow. Now the main event, WrestleMania 18, as I said, Stephanie was with Jericho, and she was dressed in a special, like, bodysuit. It was a green, sparkly green bodysuit. She actually looked pretty good, I thought. What the hell? So, we all know now, Triple H wins the WWF Undisputed Championship. He has the World Heavyweight Championship and the WWF Championship. He holds them both up in the air, and that ends WrestleMania 18. And then they go into a video package of WrestleMania 18 highlights with the Saliva music playing in the background. So good highlight video. And WrestleMania 18 was a pretty damn entertaining WrestleMania. I enjoyed it. If I rate it, I'd say WrestleMania 18 was a 9. Very good show. I enjoyed it. This ends my Year in Wrestling 2002 video, part 1. I'll be back probably tomorrow, and I'll try to do a part 2 of 2002, the Year in Wrestling. Hope you enjoyed this part 1. Have a good weekend and good Friday night. Bye for now, everybody.